Distinguished guests, friends, colleagues, welcome to you all. The United States and the Republic of Korea are great friends, and today's event, we hope, will include some strong practical next steps for our strong alliance, particularly in the context of industrial cooperation. I'm Derek Morgan, Executive Vice President of the Heritage Foundation. And I know many of you are pretty familiar with Heritage, but let me just say a few words for those of you who are new. The Heritage Foundation is America's largest conservative think tank. We were founded by Ed Feulner in 1973, and he also started our Asian Studies Center in 1983. We were ahead of the curve among Washington think tanks in understanding the importance of Asia. Unlike many others in Washington, the Heritage Foundation does not accept any governmental money or contracts, domestic or foreign. We guard our independence fiercely. The Heritage Foundation is not a Republican think tank. We're not a political organization. We're an independent, conservative, think and do policy organization that is based in Washington, D.C., but not of Washington, D.C. This morning, I'm especially pleased to welcome back Ambassador Jong-Young Choi back to the Heritage Foundation as the featured speaker for today's event. Ambassador Choi is a longtime dear friend of many of us here at Heritage, affectionately known as JK. He's had many titles in his career: doctor, minister, ambassador, president, professor, chairman, but I particularly like one from 2012 to 2014 when he was a distinguished visiting fellow here at the Heritage Foundation. I was Vice President of Domestic Policy at that time, and Ambassador Choi was with our foreign policy team and Jim Carafano, who I saw just a minute ago. Although I didn't get to work with him on a day-to-day basis, I know that Ambassador Choi was not a name-only fellow. He came into the office almost 5 days a week, whether it rained or snowed, except on days of speaking engagements or vacations. He was an active participant in formulating policy ideas directly and indirectly, especially as to advancing the alliance and the partnership between our two nations. Today, Dr. Choi joins us at Heritage as the Republic of Korea's Special Presidential Envoy and Ambassador for Investment and Industrial Cooperation. He's going to update us and remind us of the importance of our time-tested, pragmatic alliance. Needless to say, the Republic of Korea and the United States have accomplished a lot together. Yet, we can do a lot more. Our alliance has a track record of supporting mutual interests of two like-minded nations across the Pacific, while overcoming challenges and adapting to an ever-changing economic and security environment. Through my multiple visits to Seoul over the years, I know that South Korea's relationship with the U.S. has been underpinned and reinforced by a strong foundation of shared entrepreneurship, enduring people-to-people ties, and close business cooperation led by global companies in both countries. In fact, earlier this year, just a few days prior to the January 20th inauguration of President Trump, Anthony Kim and I published a policy paper that lays out specific practical partnership agenda for the U.S. and the Republic of Korea. I believe you have it there on your desk, on your table. Ambassador Choi will make his keynote presentation, and then after that, we're going to have panel discussions moderated by my colleague Anthony Kim, particularly focusing on some practical opportunities, especially related to nuclear energy and shipbuilding cooperation. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming back Ambassador Choi to the Heritage Foundation.
It is very difficult to deliver a speech in English just after a good English speaker like Derek Morgan, but I'll try my best. Good morning. I sincerely appreciate the Heritage Foundation for granting me this valuable opportunity to discuss bilateral industrial cooperation between the United States and the Republic of Korea. As Derek Morgan said, I was a visiting fellow of this prestigious institution for 3 years, from 2012 to 2015, which was around when the US government introduced the Asian pivot policy and started discussions on Japan's rearmament. My experience here enriched my understanding of global politics and the intricate dynamics of international power relations. More importantly, the Heritage Foundation also provided me opportunities to study the principles of the founding fathers: individual freedom, free enterprise, and limited government as essential building blocks of freedom. 3 years here opened my eyes to catch the critical importance of freedom. Indeed, freedom serves as the fundamental driver of human progress, fostering advancement in both economic and non-economic arenas. The dramatic transformation in human lifestyle during the 19th century and the 20th century were driven by innovations such as petroleum, electricity, home electronics, telephone, automobiles, computer, internet, and airplane, which were all developed in the United States of America. Why? Why in the United States, nowhere else? Because the US fostered the free enterprise system that drove unprecedented technological development. Throughout history, we have witnessed that in societies where freedom is restricted, people can never be creative and never be content except for a small number of people in positions of central authority or a central planner. Many scholars argue that development dictatorship of President Park Chung-hee is a key success factor for Korean economic miracle. But this perspective is not complete. The miracle of Han River was made possible thanks to President Park's full commitment to the free enterprise system. He even went further by providing tax credit and subsidies to Korean enterprises to enhance their international competitiveness. Therefore, I firmly believe freedom has shaped today's Korea just as freedom has shaped today's America. So at this moment, I feel obliged to say something. The sublime sacrifice of young Americans who dedicated their invaluable lives during the Korean War to protect our freedom will be remembered as long as Korean nation exists on this planet. Meanwhile, a wave of populism is on the rise. In many democratic nations, many politicians try to put equality before freedom. While populism may look sweet, it is a dangerous trap. Alexis de Tocqueville, in his masterpiece book, Democracy in America, warns that excessive emphasis on equality can degrade democracy, even lead to a new type of despotism. With that in mind, as chairman and president of the Korea-American Association, I assure you that Korea will stand by the US as a faithful ally. Korea is also prepared to stand shoulder to shoulder with the US to fight together, even if that means a bloody struggle, in order to uphold freedom for the coming generation of the two great nations. Now, turning to today's topic of bilateral industrial cooperation, it is evident that Korea and the US are naturally strong partners. From a geopolitical perspective, Korea serves as a crucial gateway for the US to engage with the Eurasian continent from the Pacific side. While Korea and the US have different yet complementary industrial structures, each nation possesses unique strengths that the other lacks. Especially by combining high technology of the US with Korea's world-class manufacturing capabilities, we can make a powerful and mutually beneficial synergy effect. The AI infrastructure, defense industry, and the nuclear power plant are just a few examples out of many for potential collaborations. Korea is ready and eager to assist the U.S. in increasing its naval vessels to maintain and strengthen the U.S. maritime supremacy in Indo-Pacific theater, which is in the interest of the Pacific Rim countries, including Korea. At the same time, Korea is willing to support the U.S. in reshoring key manufacturing industries such as semiconductors and batteries to American soil as part of the efforts to build a more resilient, secure, and stable global supply chain. Before arriving here in Washington, D.C., I had a caravan tour across 6 states: Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Arizona, where Korean electric vehicle companies, electric vehicle battery makers have their factories. During my trip, I saw how the electric vehicle battery industry serves as a great example of cooperating in reshoring manufacturing industries. Across those states, the US and Korea are working together to pave the way toward the shared goal of mutual prosperity. For instance, these Korean factories have hired more than 5,000 US workers and plan to increase about 25 more jobs by 2028. Meanwhile, Korean factory managers have remarked that tax incentives and subsidies under the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, are absolutely indispensable for our factories to operate and remain sustainable. In my opinion, the IRA functions as driving force to induce greenfield investment on American soil, thus helping the reshoring of key manufacturing industries. Korea has trade surplus with the US. I must point out the fact that this surplus is not made at the expense of the US side. This surplus originates mainly from the difference between the two countries' industrial structures. However, Korea is open to more talk on this issue and will consult with the US about practical measures to manage its trade surplus. From my perspective, a promising area for further future talk is energy trade. By importing more energy from the US, Korea can diversify energy sources while enhancing energy security. With that in mind, Korea is not only a steadfast partner of the US, but also an ideal candidate for the future membership in the Group of 8. I here welcome and support the voice coming from the Heritage Foundation members on the expansion of G7 into G8, including Korea as a new member. Korea, as a member of the Group of 8, will contribute more as a faithful ally of the US and as a dependable player in the international community. Let me conclude my short speech here. Thank you very much. Let me give you some very brief PowerPoint presentation on today's issue. Okay. If you look into trade structure between the Korea and the US, you can see we are treating America very well. The number one destination of US beef exports is Korea. And also number one destination of US LNG exports is also Korea. And Korea's imports of US energy is increasing with the time, as you see in the third diagram. And looking into Korea's foreign agricultural products market, top share is US product. So it's the US agricultural products occupies the biggest share in the Korea market. Next. This is another good example how eager Korea is to treat U.S. well. Is during the first term of President Trump, that's 2017 to 2021, and in 2017, President Trump paid a state visit to Korea, and during that occasion, 24 Korean companies made a kind of pledge or commitment to purchase U.S. goods and service, and the amount was 57.5 billion. But in reality, it was 90.8 billion US dollars, 6% more than the commitment. And let's look into the tariff rate. The MFN applied tariff rate average in Korea is 13.4%. 13.4%. That of America is 3.3, so 4 times. But if we move ourselves into Korea-US free trade agreement, the story is different. Tariff rate applied to US non-agricultural goods is zero. And for agricultural products, it's now 1.5% and will be down to zero by 2026. Just one year and some left. So next, the cross-border investment. U.S. is the largest foreign investor in Korea, and also top destination of Korea's outbound investment is the U.S. This is a very good story, right? Number one together. And our automobile company Hyundai is investing 25 billion US dollars, and also our Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix is investing into semiconductor factories in America, and the amount investment size is 43 billion US dollars. And our 3 electric vehicle battery companies have 14 projects across 7 states, and the investment size is 56 billion. And through this investment, Korean companies are creating high-quality jobs, and the number of jobs is 830,000 jobs. That's the statistic of 2023, so we expect more. And this revitalizes regional economy. So at the right below corner, thank you, Jesus, for bringing Kia to our town. There's a sign at the home in Georgia, the yard of a home in Georgia. Thank you, Jesus, for bringing Kia to our town. That's a good story. And let's look into shipbuilding. So now let's check one by one the promising area for bilateral industrial cooperation. Shipbuilding, sure. World top 1 to 3 companies are all Korean companies, right? And they have a world-class technologies and building skills for ships, commercial or military together. But now there is a legal barrier for Korean companies to build military Navy vessels for America. There is a law against it. But now 2 senators from Utah states submitted a bill saying trusted allies country can build naval vessels for America. And the definition of trusted allies, number 1, NATO member countries, and also the country with mutual defense treaty. So Korea is included. That's very fortunate. And defense. The Korea's science and technology level is placed at 8th place globally. And according to GFP, Global Fire, GFP, placed Korea at 5th. But this is not correct because this excludes nuclear weapons, so just conventional weapons. Global firepower, GFP, places Korea at the number 5. So let me give you a good example of a bilateral cooperation in defense area between the two countries. That is FA-50, Fighting Eagle. This was made by cooperation between KAI, and Lockheed Martin, the American famous company. And this FA-50 was sold to 4 foreign countries, Malaysia, Iraq, Philippines, and recently Poland. And this is light fighter bomber is first generation or 4.5 generation fighter bomber, but this is very cost effective and have good functionalities and compatibility with the U.S. weapon system. And you may say that many countries have 5th generation fighter bomber, 4.5 fighter bomber. How this nearly 4th generation fighter bomber is useful in the field? Well, you think about the patrol flight. You patrol your sky borderline. You don't have to use 5th generation fighter bomber to do that job. Very expensive. And also, if you are from the military, you may understand the cross-air support. When infantrymen are fighting to take height or something, the artillery fire for preparation, attack preparation, and also cross-air support. The fighter bomber strike the enemy on the height. So this is very good for that. You don't have to use 5th generation fighter bomber for that job. This is good for that. And in the real battlefield, the Filipino army is using this airplane for the cross-air support. Artificial intelligence. As you know very well, Korea is producing a memory chip, the highest quality memory chip. And this is also very necessary to have good AI infrastructure. So Korea can play a role there. And just after the DeepSeek shock, Sam Altman and Masayoshi Son, Korean name is Son Jung-hee, flew into Seoul and had a meeting with Lee Jae-yong, Samsung CEO and chairman. Why? What difference lies between the OpenAI and DeepSeek? Anybody can tell? What difference? What basic difference lies between the two? The OpenAI is heavily dependent on learning process, using big data, using high quality chips, using enormous amount of energy. The DeepSeek is focusing on reasoning process, using less data, cheaper chips, and less energy. So we can think of a third way between the two. This is my personal conjecture and guess. Maybe that high figures may talk about the possibility of a third way between the OpenAI and the DeepSeek. Nuclear power. This is, I think, one of the most promising areas for bilateral cooperation. The US has highest technology in the area of nuclear power, and Korea has built 30 nuclear power plants inside and outside Korea, and has accumulated experience and building skill. So I hope the many style of cooperation will be in the future, especially in the European area. Because of the Ukrainian war, the European countries realized that too much dependence on Russian gas supply is very, very risky. So they are thinking about an alternative energy source, and that is nuclear power plant. Energy. After the shale revolution, America becomes the main producer country of the fossil fuel energy, gas and oil. Korea is prepared to cooperate with the US. We will import more energy from the US, as I said in my speech. That is good for Korea because we can diversify our energy sources, and that means dependence on the US supply means more energy security. So, and the President Trump said in his recent address that Korea is interested in LNG project in Alaska. Yes, we are very much interested in that project. This is, as I said, so I will skip. Let me have some minutes for this. Innate creativity of Korean people. The double entry bookkeeping is regarded as Western philosophers such as Max Weber and Goethe, that cornerstone of Western capitalism. But the first nation using double entry bookkeeping is Korean. In 15th century, Luca Pacioli wrote about Venice-style double entry bookkeeping. But 200 years before, Korea already used double entry bookkeeping, and this is officially recognized by global academic society, not just my assertion, And also the world map, Honil-Gangnido, it was made 1402, very early 15th century, the first world map including African continent. It's also officially recognized academically. And most importantly, all prototypes of fire powder weapons came from Korea. Far right side is a rocket. In 15th century, shooting range is 2 miles. So it can hit the enemy 2 miles away, the prototype of rocket. And this machine gun, 40 shots in streak. 40 shots in streak. The machine gun, prototype of machine gun. And canister fire, shrapnel cannon, in pistol, all were developed in 15th century and 16th century in Korea. So that means Korean people has innate creativity. So that is a basic asset for the bilateral cooperation. Let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Choi, setting the stage. By the way, I'm delighted to let you know our Executive Vice President, Derek Morgan, enjoys driving a Kia SUV. So we're the consumer of a Kia Korean product. I would like to invite my dear colleagues, Jack Spencer and Brent Settler, for our panel discussion. For the next, say, 25 minutes or so, we're going to do rounds of ping pong discussion. So it'll be kind of fast moving, but we're going to delve into some specific issues and opportunities. Maybe Brent and Jack? By the way, Ambassador Choi, we love to see your bright red tie. That's the Heritage Foundation tie. that really ties us together, and really appreciate your intellectual contribution as well as the friendship. As our Executive Vice President Derek Morgan mentioned, when you were with us, your kind of a sparring partner back then was our foreign policy Vice President Jim Carafano, who's standing right behind. And he's been long-time dear fellow traveler with you, Dr. Choi. Yes. So a lot more to come as we go. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Anthony Kim. I'm a research fellow and editor of our annual Index of Economic Freedom. I must say some PR, because last week we launched our 2025 Index of Economic Freedom. I noticed that a lot of Korean media have already reported the Korea's ranking in our latest index. So we appreciate your attention to our publication and the Heritage Foundation. It's been a while for us to do this kind of Asia-specific, Indo-Pacific event at the Heritage Foundation. Not because we didn't want to do it, but it was a lack of, let's say, timely opportunities or topics. But it's been a while, but nonetheless, this is only stand-only room. So I don't know if this is our power of the Heritage Foundation or your star power, Dr. Choi. We'll figure out. But Derek Morgan's opening remarks caught my ears. Among many things, he used the phrase U.S.-Korea Partnership Alliance is a time-tested. This is a time-tested partnership and alliance. And Ambassador Choi kind of delved into why and what kind of new opportunities we may have through this time-tested opportunity as we get into greater years ahead of us. For that conversation, I'm delighted to have my dear colleague, Jack Nuclear Energy Spencer. He's our nuclear energy expert, Jack, and my dear colleague, Brand Submarine Settler. So we are going to specifically talk about practical opportunities concerning nuclear energy and shipbuilding opportunities. Those are the hot topics. Obviously, it's one thing to talk about those ideas, but how to really operationalize those ideas into practice? I think that's the question we're going to delve into. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Jack. Can we start, Jack, before we get into nuclear and all that, why don't we talk about sort of general landscape under the Trump second term in terms of energy policy? We've been expecting that there will be some changes, and obviously we have seen changes. And you have known Secretary Chris Wright. What do you see? What can you share with our audience? Very quickly, the core points.
We've moved from a policy, I would argue, of energy restriction, where you have a whole semblance of policies that literally restrict our access to energy, the energy that the United States is blessed with, to one of energy abundance, one that puts a premium on ensuring that American families and businesses have access to the clean, affordable, energy that we need to run our economy, which is a totally different approach. It's reliant more on private sector decision making and less on government decision making. It relies more on the market to push us forward and less on regulation. And on this point of regulation, it's important to remember a decrease in regulation does not mean a decrease in public health and safety. It means that you're empowering me and you, the energy producers and users, to make decisions on our own accord, and leaving it out of the halls of Washington, which have too often not been about public health and safety, but more about political preference. And moving from political preference to what the market needs, that's the difference.
So more private sector driven and market driven, I think that's the key point here. Now, we've been hearing a lot about LNG, among other things, but not yet so much on, let's say, nuclear specifically. What do you see here? I mean, obviously, your recent book, Nuclear Revolution.
Available on Amazon.com or wherever you get your books.
We are looking at opportunities in terms of PR. So, what do you see? I mean, it's one thing that, again, we say South Korea, US, we can work together on this energy, especially nuclear energy, capacity, know-how, and all that. But what kind of real practical opportunity do you see, and how do we get there from here?
Look, I think the whole world has come to the recognition that this drive towards so-called net zero, this political drive to reduce carbon dioxide through intermittent energy sources like wind and solar doesn't work. We've seen it. We've seen the cost of it here in the United States. We've seen it in Europe. And this has caused people to think outside of the intermittent energy world to open up their minds once again to nuclear energy. But nuclear energy is not just about CO2 reduction, although if you care about that, it certainly does that. It's about energy security, it's about reliability, it's about understanding what your costs are going to be over the long term. And what this has done, Anthony, is given a massive rise in demand for nuclear energy across the world, or interest. Let's call it interest for now. Hopefully it will lead to demand. And there are only a handful of countries that can help meet that demand. Russia's one. Russia's been very successful with exporting commercial nuclear power. China's built a lot of reactors recently, and they certainly want to get involved in that export market. The United States, we've had some success there. And South Korea. Now, if we want, I would argue, if we want to compete, really compete with the Russians and the Chinese for what could be a massive, massive growth on nuclear energy demand, we have to work with our South Korean allies on this. As we heard about earlier, they've become experts in construction. They've been successful in exporting. America, we have the best technology in the world. That U.S.-South Korea collaboration will really help us compete in this growing nuclear market. And while collaboration and cooperation is important, and we need to facilitate that and nurture it, it also helps with competition too. The U.S. companies will compete with South Korea in good faith, and that's good. That will, iron sharpens iron. So it's good for South Korea industry. It's good for U.S. industry. It really benefits both countries and gives us an opportunity to succeed where really Russia has taken a big step forward, and China is certainly nipping at their heels.
Just very quickly, Jack, I know you've been to Korea many times. Why Korea? What makes Korea unique in this cooperation? I mean, we could go with Japan too.
Well, we shouldn't ignore Japan. Japan's an important part of this, but I shouldn't say but. And we have a 70-year history of cooperating on nuclear energy with South Korea, and it's a recent history as well. We recently, American companies recently built 2 reactors in the United States, and those pressure vessels came from South Korea. South Korea recently built, the reactors that they recently built in UAE used a lot of U.S. technology and a lot of U.S. That created a lot of U.S. jobs. So there's real recent progress on commercial nuclear that has resulted from U.S. and South Korea cooperation. And there's just tremendous opportunity for growth in that space.
So let me transition from you to Brand before I go to Ambassador Choi. Allow me to say, I think during the ambassador's presentation, we saw kind of U.S.-Korea relationship through the prism of trade. So U.S. becomes importer, Korea exporter. But I think that we may want to tweak that a little bit, because now, after all, this is the 21st century. And I think this is time to think about co-developer and co-investor. I think that may be the frame we should have, whether it's nuclear energy or especially shipbuilding. And on that note, I'd like to invite Brand. Without kind of juggling around, I want to ask you directly. So during the State of the Union address last week, President Trump kind of dropped this very important office within the White House, Office of Shipbuilding. You and I, we talked about even before State of the Union. And I know you had, for some reasons, visiting Florida, Mar-a-Lago area, Palm Beach. I don't know what kind of conversations you had. What kind of insights can you share with us?
Yeah, thanks. So 안녕하세요 and 같이 갑시다. Because we do go together, South Korea and the United States. It's a partnership, as was already laid out by the ambassador. There's a lot of natural complementary aspects to that. And with that actually realization years ago, so Heritage has been at the center of this, and I've been lucky enough to have been here since 2020 on the shipbuilding. The United States, it's no secret, it needs help, it needs to attract capital. And this is where treaty allies like South Korea come in and play a big role. But you got to have leadership at the top. And this has been like the missing ingredient for far too long in the United States. Now, clearly with President Trump, we have a leader that appreciates how significant the maritime industrial sector is to the Navy, which what got me very excited about this years ago, but also for our economic viability. It's the ships on which our energy travels and is moved. It's also how our economy stays afloat, quite literally. And so there's a lot there, and that realization, I think, in the White House today. You see a commitment last week before both House and the Senate, and to the nation that this is a national priority now, is revitalizing the nation's maritime industrial base. And one of the ways to do that, to execute a president's personal investment in this, is having someone leading the charge in the White House on a day-to-day basis to make sure that all of the various agencies and departments are also working in tandem.
You know, that's going to be under NSC or maybe different parallel structure? How would that work, as far as you can tell?
So there's already an office that was there in the White House with about a week after the inauguration. It was the first one fully stood up. That's the seed corn. That's the genesis for this potential change of a shipbuilding office. But that was the first one that was established. That's in the NSC. Now, Mike Waltz, who is the NSA, the director of the NSC, before he got to the White House, he was leading the charge on legislation. What I think you're going to see is a special advisor. Some would call him a czar. And that's someone that sits between or co-equal between the NEC, so the National Economic Council, as well as the National Security Council, because the realization at the very senior level in the White House is that shipbuilding in the maritime sector does have a national defense aspect. And the only way you're going to fix this weakness in the nation is reaching out with partners like South Korea, which also has a heavy economic and trade relation, thus the NEC, but also the national security. We also have to address the needs of the Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard at the same time. So more to follow. It's less clear structurally, but one thing I think is very certain is that President Trump is very attuned to this issue.
One more question for you, Brent, before I go to Ambassador. By the way, for our audience, we will have some time to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, still start think about it, and then we'll welcome those, maybe 2 or 3, if possible. So Brent, you and I went to Korea together. Obviously, you served in the Navy for 27, almost 3 decades, captain, submarine. You know the ocean, and you know Korea. But again, let me ask you the same question, because this is totally unscripted kind of Q&A for sure. I asked Jack, why Korea? Let me ask you the same question. It's one thing that, Korea, US, it's a very fashionable thing nowadays. Every think tank, every expert now talk about shipbuilding, shipbuilding, shipbuilding. But I think as Derek mentioned, Heritage Foundation is not only think tank, but we are do think.
Yes.
Do tank. So what do you see in terms of what, we do have a case, but how do we make that case reality?
So, first and foremost, the ambassador mentioned is that we have a mutual treaty, a defense treaty between our two countries. So at the highest level, national survival, we have a common shared interest. And we have a history that goes back all the way back to 1950. So that's a partnership and alliance that is born in blood, in several wars, actually, that our two countries have fought together. So that's at the top of this. Economically, our interests, and as mentioned, our economies are complementary. And we do have free trade agreements. And so the economic interests are also kind of aligning. And this is where the shipbuilding piece comes in my mind. South Korea is a leader, if not the leader, in shipbuilding. Not necessarily in capacity, but in the technologies and the techniques in the shipyards. And so when the United States looks for a partner that it can trust, it can find no better one in the maritime industrial sector than South Korea. And so it makes sense as we try to attract capital to invest and to reinvigorate our shipyards and our shipbuilding in this country, which is a strategic vulnerability not just to our country, but to our allies as well. A common cause is very easy. But the final thing is South Korea for me is not something in the last few years I discovered. It goes back to my childhood and even a godfather who was in Korea as the chief for Naval Forces Korea back in the early 70s. And so in my mind, it's a natural partnership in so many ways.
I think that's also fitting into this time-tested alliance we are enjoying these days. Obviously, the Heritage Foundation, as Derek mentioned at the beginning of his remarks, we are not a lobbying organization, but we are very much interested in ideas, especially new, doable ideas. And I think these energy, especially nuclear and shipbuilding, they can be something we can actually work together to operationalize. And our main audience here in our headquarters is not just private sector only. Obviously, private sector is a driver, but we have a Congress and executive branch, And that's why I think we are strategically located on this location so that we can talk to Congress and even educate them if necessary. But we are not going to be able to, on behalf of the Republic of Korea, we're not going to make a beautiful Hail Mary pass and make a touchdown. It's a kind of yard by yard approach. And also I want to highlight energy security, nuclear, LNG, whatever, energy security. And Brett just mentioned, Navy and forces. That's basic national security. And then Ambassador Choi been talking about economic security together. So to me, these all three, national, energy, economic securities, are interwoven. And that's the package in front of a U.S.-South Korea partnership. Ambassador, if I may, I remember, I don't know the exact sentence, but something like during the president's inauguration speech, the second one, obviously, on January 20th, he said, America will be a manufacturing nation again. America will be a manufacturing nation again. If that's the kind of thesis, how do you think that South Korea can contribute to that goal?
Korea is number one powerhouse in terms of manufacturing capabilities and manufacturing skill. So if America wants to have manufacturing industries again on American soil, I think Korea is well placed to help America to have manufacturing industries. So we can think about many types of cooperation, and the battery business is showing a very good case. Not every, but the battery companies here is a joint venture between Korean battery companies and automobile makers, U.S. automobile makers. So joint venture style. That's a good type of cooperation. And also, Korea can, move some facilities onto American soil and operate here. That's the strongest type of contribution Korea can provide to America. The important thing here is, when investors make decision to find a final destination of their money, they think about the investment climate. The first one, labor cost, and infra, like transportation, communication, energy, something like that, and the regulation. So the leveling the playing field is important. So United States of America maybe looks favorable for investment. So whether it's Korean investors or other countries' investors. So some kind of efforts to level the playing field in terms of the investment climate is, I think, important. So I think some part of the IRA or CHIPS Act better be maintained. So the Speaker Johnson said, instead of using sledgehammer, better use scalpel, or between scalpel and the sledgehammer, he said. So I think the sledgehammering is not a good way of doing things, and maybe scalpel or something between scalpel and sledgehammer is I think, important. So some people may think that the credits in the CHIPS Act and the IRA is just a benefit provided to foreign investors, but it is interpreted as a American side efforts to leveling the playing field for the foreign investors.
Thanks for that perspective. I mean, once again, maybe it's me or maybe everybody's feeling the same way. I think we have to move away from simple exporter-importer relationship to co-developer and co-investor. I think that's much bigger picture and more practical and strategic. So perhaps that can be one of the action items we can think about out of this conference. Now, Jack, when we talk about nuclear energy, it's not just a conventional big nuclear power plants. Nowadays, sometimes the smaller, the more effective. I'm referring to SMR, small modular reactor. And Korea has been very much keenly interested in this technology. It has already capacity to a certain degree. And here we see joint investment from Korean companies into US companies. What kind of purse can you share with us on SMR front?
Certainly there's a lot of opportunity there. We have massive projections for growth in energy demand. And a lot of that demand growth is coming from specific industries who may well need their own power source. And in that context, something like an SMR could be exactly what they need. And just like with other technology, our cooperation with South Korea, I think, will make sure that we'll give those technologies the best opportunity to go forward. But let me just add, it has to be driven by the market. Not to debate with my colleague on the stage here about the value of the IRA subsidies, but I just got to give my view since I'm here, which is I would argue we need to be skeptical of having certainly the nuclear industry driven by those subsidies, because that can, I would say historically has, obfuscated the actual economics of the underlying technologies. It distorts investment and creates dependency that will yield an industry that is unable to be sustainable should the subsidies go away. I think that with SMR specifically, given the place in that technological evolution and the commercialization of that technology that we're in right now, which is very nascent, we would be better off over the long term, certainly for the United States, I won't speak for any other country, certainly for the United States, that technology be driven by the market, because the demand is there, the technology is there, the ability is there. It should be driven by economics, and that's how we become successful. That's how we ultimately compete with the Russians and the Chinese, because that's where our competitive advantage lies. It's with free enterprise, it's with the market-driven economy. That's what makes America, the American ingenuity and industry better than many of our competitors.
As always, I feel your free enterprise energy from you. So
and by the way, that argument's in this book here, Nuclear Revolution.
we appreciate. Last question for you, Jack. Just very quickly, do you see any practical possibility for South Korea, U.S. team up and go to a different continent, different countries? I'm talking about, let's say, we go to Europe together to build either conventional nuclear power plant together or SMR. Just quickly, do you think that's possible?
Absolutely. Not only possible, I think it is in many cases preferable, because it gives both countries an opportunity to become better at building these power plants so they can be more economical, so we can really achieve the nuclear revolution that many of us think we need in order to power our modern growing economies.
Maybe that's one way, another way of globalizing U.S.-Korea partnership and alliance, know-how, capacity, and trust.
And we bring different things to the table. And that's what cooperation and collaboration is all about. What does each party do best? How can you come together to put forth an effort that is competitive or better than anyone else in the world? And that's what the opportunity is between our nations.
In that context, cooperation, collaboration, trust, and all that, Brent, you've been working, well, for some time before this bill, Ships for America Act, when it emerged finally as a kind of presentable form in December. But before December last year, you've been working hard with members of Congress. What do you see in terms of the fate of this bill, Ships for America, timeline? And also, I was going to ask you about the Jones Act. This is something that Korea has been paying attention to, and you and I, we've been arguing. So anyways, let's go with the Ships for America Act first, quickly.
Sure, I'll touch on all of those. The best analogy that I use, and I did this with our president, Kevin Roberts, not too long ago, was the analogy of a car. And the Jones Act is one of the wheels of this car that it's the motive force. It's not the solution. So be very clear. When it comes to the SHIPS Act, to get the ambassador's point, it's creating a favorable environment that attracts investment in the United States, but targeting this industrial sector specifically because of the national security imperatives behind it. So that's how I would characterize the SHIPS Act. Now, in December, It came after an election. A lot of political energy shifted away from the topic. The bill as it was forward is not what will come in this Congress. There will be some revisions to it. But I can tell you, because sleep has been something in short supply the last couple of months, that this bill is coming forward again. The intent still is the same. Set a favorable investment environment, not just for South Korean interest, but allied and U.S. interest into American waterfronts so that we can get more ports, which is, by the way, one of the other wheels of this car, so we can actually start to attract and modernize our shipbuilding at these ports, which includes naval repairs in the mix. It also includes investment in the human capital or incentivizing folks that are merchant mariners that maintain their credentials. Those that are in high school that are trying to figure out what job they want, either they can go hopefully become naval architects, which we don't produce enough, another place for South Korea and the United States to partner on addressing. It's one of the reasons why Navy has so many problems, is that we have a dearth of that capacity, but also modern techniques of blue-collar workforce. Labor at the waterfronts, dock workers, new technologies that can actually improve productivity. There's no reason to be afraid of modernization. And then finally, and this is the most important piece, and was actually, I think, watered down in the version that we saw in 2019, but I think will come back in the next iteration. And clearly, I think in coming days, you might see directives from the president that also addresses this in the form of, say, an executive order, and that is innovation. The United States' maritime industrial base has not been competitive in a global scale, and this is where the Jones Act doesn't address and where it's weakest. And this is where also partners, we can actually build an American comparative advantage and regain some share of the global marketplace that makes sure that allies like South Korea and others, that they have a partner that's viable in moving its own trade, but also more importantly, in the case of national security issues and alliances, is able to sustain military operations overseas. So those are the four wheels of the car. The Jones Act, which is an immediate kind of control of the demand signal for mariners and ships. Another wheel is the ports and attracting capital to that in the front and the direction that we go. But the motive force to get forward, that's the people. And it's also in the innovation, a comparative advantage. So I hope I didn't go too long, but
Thank you,
that's
Brian. I want to emphasize that Jack and Brian, really, they are leading experts on nuclear energy and shipbuilding. So especially our friends from Korea, if you have a more insight needed, then please feel free to contact them. I think they'll be happy to share more insights. Any burning questions from our audience? One or two. If not, maybe one. I'll give you lady floor. Maybe we'll collect two.
Is it on? Yeah. All right. Okay. My name is Ju Hyung-hong from the Seoul Times based in Seoul. And I'd like to ask to Mr. Spencer. There has been a report that the U.S. DOE, Department of Energy, is reviewing classifying Korea as a sensitive country in nuclear aspect with regard to the pursuit of Korean independent nuclear capabilities in Korea. So if this realizes, would it be feasible to pursue nuclear cooperation, both in terms of privately and publicly?
Good question. I'll collect one more so that we can do it all together. Gentleman there.
Thank you. My question is for the ambassador. What tangible successes can you anticipate or you would like to see in the next 2 to 4 years, both in nuclear capacity expansion and shipbuilding from your side? Thank you.
Another great question. I'm going to put into ambassador's last concluding comments, but Jack, could you address that sensitive country list?
First of all, it's a hypothetical at this point. It hasn't happened, so I'm not comfortable saying what may or may not happen. And that's largely a foreign policy question I would suggest. However, let me say this. Nuclear weapons are not a new technology. They've been around for a long, long time. And I would ask whoever's contemplating this, if South Korea were, and I'm not suggesting they are going to, I don't think they are, I'm not saying that. But if they were interested in building a nuclear weapon, would cooperation with the United States on commercial nuclear power make that more or less likely to happen? I would argue it would make it less likely to happen because we too often conflate commercial nuclear with military nuclear. They're very different things. If South Korea or if any country wants a nuclear weapon, let's be honest, they can get it. So ongoing cooperation on commercial nuclear is not going to enhance South Korea's ability to build a nuclear weapon. So I would look at these two questions very separately. If a nuclear weapon is in their future, we should be asking why and address that. And at the same time, we can nurture and develop the commercial nuclear relationship, because that is a separate track. Once you start getting, there are technologies that could be, that might be related, but I would even argue there that they're very separate. That in those instances where countries have built nuclear weapons, we knew exactly what they were doing. It was a lack of political will to do anything about it. So we shouldn't pretend like if country X doesn't develop, a certain technology, then they won't develop the weapon. They're independent things. So I think we need to be really careful about these hypothetical reports, and then really careful about conflating commercial nuclear with military nuclear. They're very separate.
Jack says hypothetical, just footnote before I go to Ambassador for his last remarks. This is not official final kind of conclusion by the DOE. We don't know, but he and I, we've been talking about this morning. This is something the South Korean reporting agency, I forgot what company, newspaper, but it started from there. In Washington, we haven't seen any trail of this conversation. So let's see what comes out, but this is why Jack has been emphasizing this is hypothetical situation. Ambassador, thank you. Your last comment. I think that's really a good question.
Okay.
What do you see within next 6 or 2 to 4 years?
2 to 4 years is not a long time to see a tangible result, but I think in terms of nuclear power plant cooperation, I think we could see at least acquire some contracts in the European countries very soon. And shipbuilding, also we have to have first the blueprint, which kind of naval vessels, how many vessels, and the time frame, due delivery time. So if we have a clear blueprint, the two countries' governments can make a talk channel, and then orderly plan and execution will be there. So I'm very optimistic in the area of shipbuilding, and in the area of nuclear power, very optimistic. And thank you again for Heritage Foundation granting me this opportunity, especially thanks to Derek Morgan and Anthony Kim, and the gentleman over there, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's really fitting, and also want to let you know the Heritage Foundation, the former president and founder of the Heritage Foundation, he has been teaching us it's always about adding and multiplying good ideas and good forces. I think this is another beginning of that process together. So more to come, and we look forward to making good things happen together with you all. And next time, we'll have a similar event, and until then, this meeting has adjourned. Thank you so very much.